Hey everyone. So my name is Katie. I worked at the Minnesota Food Association for 6 years, and the last 3 years have been working as a consultant with MFA and other nonprofits to continue doing farmer training, farmer support in different areas. So today we're talking about record keeping. Not the most exciting topic, but one that's really important and one that you will continue to hear a lot about, or many of you probably already have heard a lot about. Just so I have an idea, who here has already farmed for at least one season and kept some records, or at least tried to keep some? Okay. Okay, so for everyone else, this will be your first season growing. Is that correct? Okay. So I think, we'll just start. The first thing to think about with records is why you're keeping them. And the first question as to whether you're going to keep records or not is, are you farming as a business or as a hobby? So you might not know that right away. Maybe you just know you want to grow things and you're going to figure that out depending on if you make money or not. But if you're growing as a hobby, so that's not necessarily to make money, just because you, for yourself, for your family, you enjoy it, records are less important. If you're going to farm as a business, records are essential. So I kind of see that as records really kind of make a difference in how you're farming. Because really records are what, give you, that's how you know if you profit, which is basically what a business is, if you make money. So, really to be considered a business, you need to know if you're making money or losing money. So what are your sales, what are your expenses, how much do you profit? So seems pretty simple. It's amazing how many people don't have those numbers after they've been farming for many years. I think it's really important to remember that farming is a business. It's a lot of people farm because they love it, and that's great that you love it. And you do have to love it because you probably aren't going to make a lot of money. But you still have to treat it like a business and keep track of those numbers. Also, I like to think of record keeping as a tool. So just like you have your tools in the field, record keeping is a really important tool that you bring to the field with you. So you needed to know how to manage resources efficiently. Keeping records keeps track of, again, where you're making money, where you're losing money, how much time you're spending on different tasks. It's a really important planning tool. So your business is probably going to evolve and change every year. The best way to predict how you're going to do the next year is to base those predictions on your records. So if you grow on 1 acre and made $10,000, if you grow on 3 acres, you can predict that you'll make about $30,000. If you harvested 100 pounds of carrots in a 100-foot bed, you need to harvest 500 pounds of carrots the next year, to plant 500 feet. So it's really the best way to improve your production and to guarantee a product. Some other reasons to keep records: if you want to buy land, to get a business loan or a farm loan, you'll need to show records. You'll need to prove that you've been in production and have been farming. Laura, do you have the FSA handout? Did you bring those? No. I emailed it to you the other time, before class got canceled. Okay, I can get that if anyone's interested. So they have a loan that's designed to help farmers. It's designed for farmers. It lowers some of the costs that you would typically have with with a residential loan. It also helps. It's not just a business loan. It looks at kind of a home loan plus a business loan together. But they have specific records for their application, and they want to see 3 years of production. And it doesn't have to be, there's different records that you can have, but something showing that you have some experience. And I have, there's a handout that has the details of what you need for that loan that Laura can get to you if you're interested. If you want to be certified organic, records are how you verify your production to the certifying agency and to the inspector so they know how you grow vegetables. They obviously can't be there in your fields. They're basically the verifying to customers, to everyone that you're growing organically. They need to see records so they can get an understanding of your production. And so a lot of these records, like the organic records, Laura's already been talking to you about if you're in the MFA program. And there's a lot of overlap in the organic records, in the loan records. Selling to wholesale accounts is another area where you might need to think more about records. Going to farmers market doesn't require as many records. You basically harvest what you have. You need to keep record of your sales so you can figure out your profit. But with wholesale accounts, a lot of times they want some sort of food safety plan, or at least like a recall plan. So records are required for that, being able to trace back where your produce came from. The carrots that you sold to a restaurant, they want to know what date they were harvested, what field they came from, in case there's any issue with them. But then I think more importantly is so you can plan accurately. As you sell to wholesale accounts, there's often a specific date they want a crop harvested. Like for example, Minneapolis Public Schools, they want things for a specific date. It's not just any time you have them. So you need to be able to know when to plant it in order to have it harvested on a certain date. And there's, charts to look at, seed catalogs, everything has the days to maturity, but that varies. And the way you grow is different from the way your neighbor grows. Your climate is different than someone else's. So it's important to have your own records to base those predictions on. So the most important reason is really to learn from your own records. So I think that's the most motivating reason to keep records. And you may not know if you want to buy land or if you're going to be certified organic, but really keeping records is how you learn and how you improve your production. So what are some things that you'd want to learn from your production? Does anyone have any thoughts about what you might want to know as you start farming? What grows best?
In your climate.
Okay. So be more specific. Like what you get the most pounds for?
Whatever.
Yeah.
See which crops are best associated with your climate in which you live.
Yeah.
Planting tomatoes or potatoes here, good soil, cool temperature. But planting it in potatoes in a hot climate probably not the best idea.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And soil type too can have a big effect on how well your specific crops go. So yeah, keeping track of your production, how much you harvest, can give you that information.
How much bait for the amount of labor that you put in for different crops.
Yeah. Yep. So that gets more complicated as you try to keep track of labor, but definitely knowing your sales, how much money you make on a crop, and how much time you put into that crop. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really important because we don't often think of our time as money and value our time as farmers. But you're going to want to make, if you want to do this as a living, you have to figure that in. So keeping track of labor for sure can help. It's really important.
Probably seed types, specific
Mm-hmm.
seed names.
Yeah, so varieties, keeping track of your varieties, that's a really good one. Varieties can really vary how well they produce on your farm. Even though the seed catalog says this is the sweetest tasting carrot, you might find another variety is. And if you're selling at farmers markets, really advertising and having the best tasting carrot is what's going to, help you sell those carrots. So keeping track of varieties. I'd say don't do too many in the beginning because every time I seem to get something confused. Label gets switched on a type of tomato, and so if you start with 20 different tomatoes, it can get a little complicated to make sure you're keeping track exactly of what's what.
Since I'm new, I'm trying seed starting in a variety of different ways. Like I do some in pods and some in different types of starter methods. So I'm definitely keeping track of like what performed, what popped up, the fastest. So I sowed this one first, I did sow this one, and this one was like in warmer conditions, have more light, so it's made a difference. And just in a short amount of time, I'm like, okay, I didn't really like the way that went. So the next one, I'm going to maybe start this way. So I mean, I remember that a year from now. So
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's a lot of detail to remember. So, and keeping track of which one of those you harvest from first.
Right.
That's a lot of really helpful information. So experimenting with different, if you're going to experiment, you might as well keep track. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to really learn from that work.
I would say planting day and input weather is also important because you will know how to track about when you start seeding, when you transplant to outside plots, and how much input you put as fertilizers or pesticide whatever. That's also important, so that's why record keeping is a good tool.
Yeah, definitely. So knowing when you plant and when you then harvest, or remembering then the next year when you planted in case you can't remember when to start those peppers in the greenhouse. And inputs, that's really important, keeping track of your fertility.
What the weather was like during planting and harvest. If you're a beginning farmer, you're not going to really know what it was in the past. But if you intend to be a long-term farmer for 10, 15 years, you start tracking what the weather was like when you planted, you can actually determine, it's actually warmer now, we can plant 2 days, 3 days earlier than we used to.
Yeah, right, definitely. Also, just keeping track of the weather. Maybe you didn't get a good harvest of peppers one year. So knowing is that because it was really hot or because it was really cold, did the weather affect some of the production of some of your crops? If you had a lot of disease, if you keep track of the weather, that'll help you figure out some of your problems. Not everything is timing. There's many variables in farming. So that would be a good one. Yep.
I guess I have a question since we're talking about weather. Because I've heard about this thing called like the Farmers Almanac. It's supposed to be like, I don't know, weather predictions, maybe based on the past. I don't know exactly what it is, but is that like a useful document?
I think there's a lot of power in believing in what you're doing. So the Farmers Almanac, it's just a publication that yearly they put out a little book. I mean, it's a little magazine type book. It has a lot of information. Some people would say it's all doesn't mean anything. Other people probably plant their whole garden and farm around it. So
is it based on historical weather patterns or something?
I think it's based on, I'm not sure exactly what it's all based on, but there's biodynamics. I don't know if people are familiar with biodynamic farming. I would say there's some overlap there. So thinking more about the energy behind the plants and how that relates to the weather, not just the obvious things, but some other correlations, the moon patterns. I definitely think there's useful things in the almanac and however you choose to use it. But anyone else have any experience with the Farmers Almanac? Dad? It's fun. It's kind of fun reading. Those are all great suggestions, and maybe we don't even have to do class tonight. You guys you have a lot of reasons. You have a lot of good thoughts about records. Like we were saying, so what do you want to know? I know when I started farming, one thing that was really important to me was knowing the income per crop. So So I kept track of all my sales per crop and then just added that up at the end of the year. I also wanted to know weekly sales and how that changed during the season to get a sense of cash flow. So just organizing income in those ways was helpful to me. You know, it could often be really low in the spring, your weekly sales. So what are some things that you can add to increase those sales? So I knew that I made a lot of money on zucchini. Well, it depends on your markets, especially with a crop like zucchini. You usually can't grow limitless amounts of one crop unless you have a wholesale contract. But it's still interesting to know. And if you didn't very much money on arugula and you really didn't like growing it, then it just helps you like cut things out that you don't need to spend time on growing. And a lot of this, you know, we talk about how important records are. A lot of this is just observation and things you know and just think about during the season. And don't really need a record to look at to know. But some things aren't as obvious. And even if you do learn something just based on observation, you know that you don't need to look at your sales to know that you didn't sell very much arugula. I would still encourage you to make a note of it somewhere in your records, because you might just not think of that when you're ordering seed and doing your plan for the next year. So even just making a note somewhere can be helpful for when you go to making your plans for the next year. So these are some of the reasons that I wrote down that we pretty much talked about. But having accurate harvest dates and planting dates. So knowing if you planted something too early or too late. If you're doing greenhouse production and your basil was still only this big on June 1st, not ready to plant out, then you know you should start it earlier. Again, harvesting crops on specific dates can be really important. So keeping track of when you planted and when you harvested, and then being able to plan based on that for the next year. Accurate amounts, like we talked about, what's your average yield? Depending on your size, you can do that for a bed, 100-foot bed, per acre, depending on the scale you're growing. What crops sell the best? What varieties are the earliest or the highest production? Like you talked about with the varieties, they can vary really with taste, with disease and pest resistance, timing, production. What crops are the most profitable? So not only how much time do you put into each crop, but what are your expenses per crop? This is something that's in other businesses, it seems more common to keep track of different enterprises, things that bring in different income. In farming, it's not very common to keep track of different crops unless you only grow a couple. And that's because farmers grow so many. Vegetable growers often have up to 70 different varieties. So it's really complicated to keep track of all of those. But I think it can really make a difference in your profitability as a farmer. The other reason, not really something to learn from, but to keep track so you can practice crop rotation, which will affect the productivity of your fields, and also required for organic certification, but yeah. So just an example of a harvest record. So on July 10th, basil was harvested from field B, the amount 20 pounds, and it's going to shared ground. So that's probably the same categories on this harvest record. So Laura has handed this out in your green binder. So the date, the crop, the plot or field, harvested for, the amount. Yep. So there's also one more column for the amount ordered. So you have this record if shared ground says we want to buy double the basil from you next year. You can see what you harvested, you can go back to your planting record, see what you planted, and double it. Hopefully that's what they're saying. So I would suggest starting really simple at first with records. I mean, depending on your personality. Some people really like keeping records and analyzing this information. I'll say it's really hard too when you're busy. Often there's limitless tasks with farming. There's always more weeding to do. You gotta try to get these, the rest of the salad mix seeded. It's dark, you can't see anymore, your hands are dirty, you can't find a pen. It's hard to make sure you write down, the date you've seeded. A lot of people take pictures now. There'll be a date then. You can just take a picture of seeding the lettuce packet on the bed that you seeded it. Yeah.
So this you have keep track of process, keep track of expenses received for this. How do you keep track of your labor? Time you put in?
Your time?
Yeah, how do you factor that in?
Yeah.
To when you calculate your profit, because your labor, how do you do it?
That's the hardest record to keep track of. We'll get to that. I was going to start simple and get more complicated, so I have that one at the end to talk about. Yeah. So I think, the basics are the money. You track your money, and often that requires the least writing. So for sales, if you sell wholesale, you're writing an invoice, all those invoices. If you're selling at farmers market, you'll need a way to keep track. Either count everything before you bring it and count it at the end. If you tend to give stuff away, then that wouldn't be as accurate. But just counting the money at the end. I know now it's not often a lot of cash, but there's tokens and credit card. Finding 10 minutes after market to add up those sales. Expenses, shoebox, envelope, folder, somewhere you can just throw all the receipts. But make sure you're getting things that you might not get a receipt with, things you buy online. Make sure you're keeping track of that as well. Mileage. I think there's a mileage handout that Laura's given you. So if you have a vehicle you use only for farming, nothing else, you can deduct you would include all the expenses associated with that vehicle, the cost of the vehicle, the gas, repair. If you have a personal vehicle you're using, then you can do mileage and nothing else.
When do you start the mileage? Do you start the mileage now?
Yeah.
Taking classes?
Yep, you can include going to classes.
Oh.
Yep. So if you have them keeping track, you can still figure it out. How many classes have you gone to? How many what's the round trip to travel to class? So yeah, driving up to wherever you farm, markets. Track of that. Planting records. I think a map is a great way to keep track of your planting records. You've all been, or depending on where you're at, some of you have been working on a map for your plan, like where you're planning to plant everything. So it can be that same map. You have your plan on here, and then as you're out in the field and you plant something, writing it on that bed and the date. You can also do it on this field planting plan and record. I kind of like the idea of doing a plan and the record on the same place. Then you're going out to the field and you have it right in front of you what you're planning to do, and you can record what you actually do. If you don't like forms, using the forms is one way to keep records. If it's just too much to try to find the right one when you're out there, when I started farming, I just used a notebook. I wrote everything down in the notebook that I did that day. And then at the end of the season, kind of went through it and totaled different things up. So input records, this was mentioned. This is important for organic certification and food safety. But I also think it's really important just so you know, inputs can be one of the more expensive things that you purchase, so you don't waste your money. So keeping track of what is effective. So that goes for fertility, any of those different kinds of fertility, the compost, manure, liquid, any sprays, foliar sprays, or like a pelleted, that comes in like a 50-pound bag. If you put 5 bags on a quarter acre and none on the other quarter acre, how does the fertility, how does the production compare? Different crops have different fertility requirements, so keep that in mind. But yeah, pest control, for sure, keep track of disease control, anything that you're spraying. Even if you're making a homemade like pest control product with like hot peppers and there's different ones out there. It's important to keep track of that so you know if it works, and also for organic certification. So I don't know if there's I think at MFA there might be one place you record all this at the farm. Who's at MFA? But basically, this is one I like to have a form for, and I keep it with all the inputs. I keep it in the shed with fertility and pest control products. So when I use one, I write it down. And there's quite a few things to remember. That's why I like a form for this one. So the date, the location, the product, the reason. Did you use it for flea beetles? Did you use it for squash bugs? The rate, the total amount you used. Yeah, I think that's everything. Harvest records, we talked about that a little bit. There's a couple ways to do harvest records. They're different than sales records. So you're going to have your sales recorded by how much sold. A lot of times that's the same as your harvest records, but really with harvest records, what we're trying to figure out is your average yields. So how much you produce per certain area. So how much zucchini you harvest from a 100-foot bed. And then it's really important to compare that to your sales. So you want to figure out how much you're losing, basically. Or even if you're eating it, if you're giving it away, if you're using it for trade, that's all really valuable. That counts as something. So you want to know that, but you need to know your average yields for predicting amounts. This is really important when you're applying for a loan. Often you're applying to increase your business, either with an operating loan to get new equipment, or for land, you're usually increasing the acreage. So you have to make projections based on your current production. What are you going to be able to produce on twice that acreage or 3 times that acreage? Everyone's production is different, so they want to know. Lenders want to see your records to make accurate estimates. Assuming then the assumption is that you will sell that, which is not a safe assumption. But often another part of getting loans is getting as proof of your markets and who's going to buy it. So like some farms, you'll weigh, as you bring in produce, you'll weigh it right away before you do any of the washing and packing. But keep all that in mind, because if you do that, that's probably before you are culling the bad products. If you bring in a big, 50 pounds of beets, 10% of those might not be sellable. So just knowing how you kept the records is important, so you can, again, base accurate projections. So if you include all of them, the good and the bad, just know that some of them are going to be bad. If you weigh it after you pull out the bad beets, then just make sure that's, you're thinking about that when you project your sales. or your harvest and your sales. Does that make sense? Okay, so labor records. Let's see something. So I would say start general. Laura has made this form for labor records. She's saying to just keep track of when you go to your field and when you leave. Yeah.
Is there, so at the farm I worked at, it was like part of a larger organization, so it had like a punch clock for employees. But is there something like that you could get that's like inexpensive, that you could put yourself in and out, or
Yeah.
employees?
Yeah, I don't know. I would think there would be, but I don't know what's involved in those machines. I mean, I know what you mean, but they also keep time. So, yeah, that would be helpful. It'd be less to think about. I don't know. Good question.
I guess in olden days, they had the punch card. I don't know.
Oh, that's different than what you're talking about. Were you actually like?
I know, I think electronic one would be easier.
Yeah. No, I was thinking of the old one because I definitely had those at jobs where you put it in and it makes the punch. Yeah, so they're kind of fun. If you can find one. But yeah, I'm thinking along those lines. Maybe coming up with something. Definitely phones give you a lot more tools for keeping track if that's a way that you keep track of things. I think record keeping has the potential to get easier. There's some software, but new software is definitely being developed that's easier to use on your phone to help track all these things and put it into useful spreadsheets. Right now, the ones I know of still require a lot of you doing the record keeping and entering data. But that will probably change soon. So I think, with keeping track of labor, keeping a small notebook with you can also be helpful. Depends on how detailed you want to get. Do you want to keep track of the specific tasks, of the specific crops, just your overall time? If you want to get pretty specific, I would keep a notebook in your pocket, and every time you change tasks, then you would want to write it down. It's not a lot of time that you're necessarily adding, but it's definitely a habit that you're going to need to get into. And then if other people work with you, keeping track of their time as well. I forgot to bring this book. I was going to bring this book to show you guys. It's called The Organic Farmer's Business Handbook. Richard Wiswall is the author. He's a farmer on the East Coast. In his book, he talks about having farming for many years, not really making a profit, basically breaking even, working, 70 hours a week during the season, and just getting frustrated that he wasn't making more of a profit. So he did what he calls crop enterprise budgets, where he really looks at all the costs associated with each crop, including labor, all his employees' labor, and then the income for each crop. And he learns where he's making a profit and what crops he's losing money. And there's quite a difference in his records. Things like green beans, it was quite a loss. And you have to think about, the price you can get for things. When you're competing with a crop that's usually maintained or harvested mechanically, it's really going to be hard to make money. So the more specialty your crops are, the more you have control over setting the price, and you can put more, the labor might not matter as much. But if you're growing, a lot of the different vegetables that are available from, different parts of the country, the world, you don't have the ability to set your own price necessarily. you might want to charge $10 a pound for green beans, but no one's probably going to buy them at that price. So he really spent, I mean, his book is not just about the crop enterprise budgets, but about record keeping in general, about business management, and how really focusing on records and just management in general is what changed the course of his business to become a quite profitable one. I don't know the numbers, but he said his family of four now lives comfortably on the farm salary, on the farm profit. So he cut out, he just went through all his crops and cut out the ones that didn't have a profit. So you're basically doing, so you'll do, for any business, for your farm, you'll do a profit and loss statement at the end of the year. He basically did that for every crop. Yeah.
I'm just curious, since he has a book, is he like living comfortably off the sales of vegetables from his farm, or also like royalties from his book?
You know, he says it changed the income of his farm. And since he says that before the book came out, I'm assuming that, yeah, that's from his farm. He has gotten a lot of, the book is very popular. And he probably, I would say more, like doing classes and workshops, it's probably quite a demand for him now. So, and looking at markets too, I think you do the same with your markets, basically analyze each one. You know, there's a lot of farmers markets out there. So looking at how much time you put into each market and what your sales are, trying to figure out which ones really are profitable. You know, when you're looking at prices, something, you know, like a way to compare it, a farmer once said this that I thought made sense, is you get a higher price at farmer's market when you're selling retail. Wholesale to larger accounts is about 50% of retail price. But if you're bringing back, you know, 50% of your vegetables after farmer's market, then you're only getting really 50% of that value. So,
Question.
yeah.
When you talk about competing with products that are produced mechanically, like
Yeah.
green beans,
Yeah.
okay, that I don't understand. How do you deal with like specialty crops that is brought to this country frozen? Okay, most of the frozen, you know, most of the some specialty crops, like to my country, Africa, they are frozen. Now, if you produce it here fresh, yeah, can you control your price? Or because these people, they go to the wholesale and they buy the frozen. Now, here you producing fresh one.
Yeah.
Can you control your price?
Well, I
Or
think you
still
kind of have to
your price on the
experiment.
frozen?
Well, I guess one thing I would say is I think those are two different products in a way, depending on what the crop is. But fresh versus frozen, you know, you can do different things with those two products. So, so you could advertise it, you know, differently, having the fresh product. But it's somewhat you somewhat have to experiment to see what price you can sell it for. So you can start, you know, if you don't have a comparison, start with how much time you spend on it and your costs, and you know, set a price based on that. If no one's buying it, you might need to reconsider that price. But I mean, you do have control. You can set a price at whatever you want as a farmer, so you do have control. It's just a matter of you know, how much people will pay for that if you can sell it at that price. So, and a lot of education is involved in that too. Educating your customers about why they would want to spend more, and that goes kind of back to the marketing from the last class. Talking about the nutritional content of a fresh product versus frozen. So different ways to advertise it, but one way to set prices is really evaluating your time and your expenses. So for the records, to do a crop enterprise budget, So the income per crop, that's fairly straightforward to keep track of. Again, farmer's market can be a harder one to track those different sales. I think that instead of keeping track at markets, seems to me that it would work better to count the total that you bring, the total you bring home of each item. But invoices, you should have it all written out if you're doing selling to any wholesale. Expenses, the things you pay for annually should be pretty straightforward. You'll have receipts. The products used for each crop, so that can get a little bit more complicated. If you buy 2-gallon jug of fish fertilizer and you use it for all your crops, keeping track of, so then that input record is really important. Keeping track of what crops you sprayed on and what's the total amount, and then using the total amount you use, what's the total price of the 2-gallon jug. So figuring out the price that you spent per ounce, or and then how it spreads out over each crop. The seeds and transplants are pretty straightforward. Labor, we've talked about. If you're a smaller scale, it's pretty hard to differentiate. If you're, especially if one bed has 3 different crops in it, and you're weeding that bed, dividing your time up between those, if you have beets and carrots and cilantro all in the same bed, I guess you just have to divide your time in 3. But it can get pretty tedious at that point. So deciding how detailed you want to be is important, and again, maybe not starting out with that level of detail. Machine usage, so that can be a little complicated. And I do have, so in his book, Richard Wiswald does have worksheets on how to analyze this information. I also have made some simplified spreadsheets that I have. And I didn't plan to go into too much detail tonight on the crop enterprise budgets, because I do see those as kind of a next level. I don't know that many farms that have done them, but I do think it is, after you've been, I wouldn't suggest it right away. I think after you've been farming a couple of years, in the beginning, you're not going to be as efficient. You're not going to have all your systems figured out for each crop, so I don't think it's quite fair to start that analyzing in the beginning. Give yourself some time to figure out the most efficient way to seed your peas, to trellis them, to weed them, to harvest them. The first couple of years might be a little awkward. You don't have the right tools, the right harvest totes. So I don't know that it's of that much value in the beginning, but at some point I definitely would think about looking at each crop individually. Let's see, because then you get into, some other, your overhead costs, delivery costs, greenhouse costs. Dividing those by each crop can get a little complicated.
Conversely, even if you did do that kind of analysis in the beginning, the pig has value for comparison, because it's like if you didn't have the right tool, then it's like you have the notes or whatever on that production, and you're like, oh, I have this new thing. It's like, oh my gosh, it reduces my cost of production by such and such an amount.
Yes, definitely. You can use those records for another purpose, to see how you can improve your time, or how a new tool improves it, or there's still a comparison between different crops. I mean, maybe there's just such a difference in tomatoes versus beets that you just know that you want to be done with one of them. So there's certainly no harm in doing it early on. I would, if you are gonna do it, I definitely would recommend buying his book. He does get into more detail on, like how to figure out how to divide the overhead costs, delivery costs. I mean, it's pretty much a percentage, figuring out what percentage of your total production is each crop. Taking a percentage of those costs that are for the whole farm operation. Yeah. Any thoughts or questions on the crop enterprise budgets? Does that sound interesting or overwhelming to people? Okay. Good.
I thought about this before from people on farms, and it's like they're failing. It's like they don't do the analysis a lot of times,
Yeah.
since they don't know where they're losing money or where they're losing time. It's like the analysis becomes really important, so that you not only know how much is going into it, but it's like you know your labor needs and stuff too, so that you're not underestimating your needs and not overestimating stuff.
Right. Yep. So again, being able to plan accurately is really helpful for that. Yep.
That was one thing that happened at the farm that I worked at, was that there was like a constant underestimation of labor needs. So it was just like things couldn't get done, or it's like, the bees couldn't get packed up, so we lost 170% of bees because they didn't get packed up for winter because the labor wasn't there. And it was like, became major financial losses.
Oh, wow.
So you had to rebuy all those bees the next year.
Huh. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty poor planning. A lot of times if it's your first year, it's hard to anticipate, but if you have years to go on, then, yeah. I mean, there's always things are going to happen, and hopefully you can learn from those mistakes when things don't go right. And but again, you'd be surprised at how many things are forgotten if they're not written down. So, did you have a question, Shua? Is it Shua?
Yeah, my question is that in order for you to file tax, do you have to have all of this record keeping?
No.
Or if you only have some, then you can still file tax? Because for my case is that because I didn't have this workshop for training, I don't know anything about record keeping. So I have the other record keeping, but I don't have the planting record, I don't have greenhouse, infill, I don't have harvest. I'm missing those three portions. So would I still be able to file my tax with
Yeah.
the other information?
All you need for your taxes is income and expenses. So did you track all your sales? You have that number. And did you keep track of all your expenses? Yeah. That's all you need.
Oh.
So you'll just file a profit and loss statement.
Okay. As long as I will see in those documents to support
Yep. And your mileage, make sure to include your mileage. That's usually one of the biggest numbers.
So mileage, expense, and
Sales.
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 Yep. Yeah, so I didn't put that in here. But yeah, usually the form, I have one that I like, but it's called a Schedule F is the tax form. And you just list all your income on top and all your expenses on the bottom. Yes, you had a question?
Is that specific to farmers?
Schedule F? Yeah. I think so. Do you know if I'm pretty sure it's.
Exhibit C is the one for profit and loss.
Okay, yeah, so Schedule F is the simplest. It's if you have not filed as your farm business as anything. If you're operating as a sole proprietor or a partnership or an LLC, then you do a Schedule F. If you're incorporated, then you do, I think, a C or, I don't know. Yeah, as a farmer, you don't have to register as anything, you don't have to register your business, you can operate as a sole proprietor. And so, then you just file it with your personal taxes. You don't have to file it as separately as business tax.
I was gonna say it's Schedule F is just basically for farmers, it has all that, right? All
Yeah, that's right,
expenses,
everything
farming
listed is
expenses.
farming expenses, yeah. Yeah.
We get to, set the loans and grant.
It's the easiest way to show your income and sales. They shouldn't require you to have a Schedule F, but they will require you to show your profit or loss. And that's the form that they're used to looking at. So they'll try to tell you that you need that you need to show that. But as long as you're able to show your expenses and sales, that'll work.
So I guess I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm like in the planning stages of my farm, like down the line, when I actually have money from it.
Yeah.
But again, what you just said is really interesting. So, because you said like, if you're structured as a sole proprietor, partnership, or LLC, then you can just Schedule F. But then if you're like, I don't know, S corp or E corp or whatever, C corp or whatever, then you would file Schedule C. So then then you don't have Schedule F would affect you for like an FSA loan, like if you structured your farm.
No, it won't affect your FSA loan. And that's why I say, like, they're used to seeing a Schedule F, because that's the simplest. That's a lot of the farmers, especially the commodity crop, are just operating as a sole proprietor. So they're used to seeing a Schedule F. So a lot of them will tell you that you need 3 years of Schedule F, but that's not true. You just need to show a profit and loss statement, which you would do for however you structure your business. And Schedule F is just the simplest. So, I think this is one of the handouts. Yeah. This is just a list of the records we just talked about. And then the handout, it also has a column for what to write down. So we've gone through all of these. Equipment, usage hours we haven't talked about, but that's, again, the crop enterprise budget. So you're just calculating a per hour cost of using your tractor, or your tractor with this implement, your tractor with a different implement. Any questions on these and what it says to include?
Question.
Yeah.
Like in terms of analyzing, I guess, like the profitability of your farm or whatever, like how do you do it if you're like making, like on the farm I worked at, they bought large equipment, that was like a capital purchase. So the tractor was bought, that was a capital purchase. It was somehow separate from the rest of the budget, but I don't know if that's just because they had it set up that way because they're part of a larger entity, but like how does that work?
Yeah, no, you could, so even on a simple form like a Schedule F, you can show capital investments, which then you depreciate them. So if you bought it with a loan, then it's easy because you would just show your loan payment. That's your annual cost. If you bought them with cash, you could do it different ways. I think you could include the whole thing in that year, or you could split it up. I don't know. But, yeah, there's different ways to do it. And it is looked at differently.
Is that like a question for like your accountant?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the accountant. Who else would be good? Yeah. A business plan like someone that advises on business plans. But an accountant should be able to help you with that.
It's just a cost of having an accountant for your farm.
I don't know. I just have an accountant do our taxes. and our farm is very small. And that ranges from like 150 to 250, but it's based against it the same as personal taxes. So they're providing some assistance during the year, like if I have questions, especially when I started, but they're not necessarily like a business counselor. If you have someone that actually is your accountant, like does payroll and stuff like that, then that would be a different fee, which I'm not familiar with. But for most farms, you don't need too much accounting support outside of some help with filing your taxes. They should be able to answer a lot of your questions. But it is hard to find an accountant that is familiar with taxes. That's familiar with farming, farm businesses. But there are some. Do you have one, Friendly? I know Hap has worked with a couple.
Lee gave us one. Michelle Bain.
Oh yeah, she's still doing it?
Yes,
She was really good.
Yeah, she did my tax just last week.
Okay.
She's really good.
I can have Laura email her contact around. I can. Okay. I don't have a whole lot left, but I wanted to talk about making a plan, thinking about how you're going to keep records. Again, it can seem pretty straightforward, makes sense, but it's surprising how difficult it is when you are really busy farming and trying to stay on top of everything. So really having things set up ahead of time and in the right places, I think is key. A notebook, just having a notebook might be the simplest way to start. Just every day, at the end of the day, writing the date and what you did. And then you can even include your harvest amounts in there if you're on a pretty small scale. Or maybe you use a notebook for just some things, like your labor, or field activity, like weeding. Some forms I think are handy to have, like the input record. You can keep it close to those inputs, so every time you go to use them, write it down. A harvest record, I think having it on a form on a clipboard makes sense. If you have a covered packing area, you can leave it there. Otherwise, you bring it out with you when you go to harvest. Like one thing we often would do is we would have on our harvest clipboard, we would have what we were going to harvest that day. This was when I was doing a CSA. And what we needed to harvest of every crop, that would be on the clipboard, and then there would be another form for writing everything. Or actually it's the same form, and there'd be another column for writing what we actually harvested. Like I said, a map. That can be a really good tool for a lot of records. You could use a map for your harvest records, to keep track of what you harvest from each bed. You probably want a bigger version than this, so you have more room to write. But definitely planting dates. You'll want to keep a map anyway. As you have a plan, you'll have a map as your plan, but it's definitely going to change. Or I don't know that I've known anyone to keep it the same as their plan. So you'll want to keep track of what you actually plant, and that's really important so you can rotate those crops. Calendar. Maylee out at MFA, she has always used a calendar for everything. Just preceding harvest, just writes it on her little day book calendar.
I was just going to mention something that's been really helpful for me regarding the map, which is a pretty inexpensive bit of software that I got called Growth. It's not software, it's like an internet membership thing called growveg.com. You can plan your garden, what you want where, but you can
Okay.
particular.
Yeah.
So, and it's growveg.com, and it's just.
Growveg.com.
been so helpful to me.
So do you go back in, I'm gonna write that down, do you go back in and then record where you actually plant stuff?
Yeah, actually, I pulled it up if you want to.
So I tried that, and I found like maybe I was doing it wrong, but it was taking so long to like draw the map and everything.
Oh,
Is
you
there,
tried
like,
it?
is there tools that just you can like populate it? Because it just seemed like it was like one at a time, one at a time.
It is one at a time at first, like the very first year you do it, yes.
You do it, you kind of put in the work the first time, and the next year it's worth it.
Well, yeah, because the next year when you, like, here's mine, for example. And the next year when you go to put tomatoes somewhere, it'll tell you where not to put them. It'll tell you where's good, you know, what the crop rotation is and what isn't. So it's, you know, at first it's kind of labor intensive.
Maybe I'll go back to it, because I got like halfway through, and I'm like, oh my god.
I've used it for now.
What software?
4 or 5 years, and it's just been a lifesaver for me, because I can never keep track of all
Yeah,
that.
I
Grow-
can put it on a spreadsheet, but it's easier if you
Grow
can see it,
veg.
visualize it. Which is
Yeah,
R-O-W.
And then it also tells you how many
dot com.
seeds to buy, and how farmers do plants.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is there a
I
cost to
tried
it?
to do it all myself. Like, I was just like, well, I think this goes here.
I think it's maybe around $35 a year.
Okay.
So it's really reasonable, and.
And you said it also helps you calculate seed amounts to order
It does.
based on your planting
Yeah,
space?
like you can see here, it showed me how many tomato plants based on the right spacing of tomatoes.
Okay.
And you guys can feel free to.
So is 18 how close to you are, or is this?
Yeah, it tells you exactly how many seeds to start and all that stuff. But it's like a moon shape, which I'm not a real serious, garden person, so that's why I can do that. I'm realizing now what that's the dumbest thing ever. Because it makes it much harder to do anything, but it looks pretty. Growveg.com.
You can do the Farmers Almanac has a similar program.
What's that?
The Farmers Almanac has a similar builder.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's as robust as that, with the ton of numbers of information.
Is it farmersalmanac.com?
So I think it's a Farmers Almanac. They have a little garden planner tool, but I tried by that one and that one, and I was like, I'll do this later. Good, I need to go back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on how you are with the computer and
But yeah, I can see the value in like going forward, like, oh, this is what I did last year.
yeah.
People that visualize it.
Mhm.
I do have it colorful, but I just do a spreadsheet and divide by the plots and I also have the crops name next to each zone as well to identify about family crops.
Mhm.
And I insert planting dates, harvest dates, total
Oh, nice.
pounds, keep simple, but I don't have a visual color and stuff.
No, this is great. So you have a nice rectangular space plot.
Yeah. Divide and have a total bed of the plants and just using identify what place I plant the family crops.
So this is a really helpful analyzing, planning and analyzing tool. You'll have multiple harvest dates.
Yep.
So you'll have that in another record, and then this will be like your first harvest
Yeah.
dates. Or maybe you'll harvest that whole bed all at once. So like basil, you'll harvest multiple times.
Multiple times, days, next week.
Mm-hmm.
You'll figure out about what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So even having this is a sheet that you go back to, and then maybe you have a notebook that you daily are writing in the field, and then you go back and you have this on your computer and you total it all up and you put it in here. So there's definitely, once you have the records, there's many different ways you can analyze the information and learn from it. That's that's the fun part, is being able to, see what you've, make some, just figure things out from what you did, see how much you produced. But yeah, so think about how you want to do it. I think, again, phones are, I know people that do it that way. I am not familiar with record keeping software for your phone. I know MFA actually just applied for a grant to develop some record keeping software. So I know there's limited types out there for actual record keeping. It seems like planning, there's some really good planning tools. And then actually getting the information recorded is often one of the hardest things to do, to then put back into some of these planning tools. So make a plan. How are you going to do it? Also, how are you going to keep track of mileage? Are you going to have a notebook in your car? Are you going to have this form in your car? Do you can just average, you go to the farm 6 days a week. What's the round trip? You go to market 3 days a week. So you don't necessarily.
GPS,
What's that?
GPS.
We'll track it.
Yeah.
So you'd have to, would you be able to, because you'd have to, if you have the car for personal too, so you wouldn't want to track when you went to the store to get groceries. What's that?
Now, I was going to say, because I think, for example, my car, I have State Farm, they have, you can track your mileage.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm coming to class, and I'm coming straight, from work,
Yeah.
here, let us report. When I'm going home, and I, drive.
So you don't have a round trip.
Not,
Yeah.
okay, so how?
Yeah.
That is not a round trip.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just look on Google Maps and figure out the mileage and then know how many days I go to my market, how many days I deliver. I don't drive to my farm, but I just keep track of, do an average of,
If I can just, let's say, one day, if I'm going to MFA, if I'm going from my house, and I drive today, let's say it's one Saturday, and I know the mileage, it took me 30, round trip, 30 miles.
Yeah.
Can I just say, okay, I go there 3 times a week and just say, okay, this month, 90 miles?
Yep. You can do that. Yes. Unless someone has heard otherwise from accountants that you need a more specific record, but it's a pretty regular schedule. If you write down like anything that's out of your regular schedule and you go to the farm 3 days a week, that's fine, I think. Were you gonna say something, Friendly?
Yeah, I was gonna say something. I think, do we just track the mileage going to the farm, or do we include the mileage coming back home too?
Yep, both.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
But if I stop by Fleet Farm to buy something, or go to Menards, that is
Well, is it for your farm? If it's for your farm.
Yeah, if I'm coming from Stillwater, and instead of coming straight to to my house, I decided to go to a store to buy something. That would
Yeah. Well, if it's for your farm, keep track of that mileage.
Before going, right? So if I'm going straight, I can just took me 12 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I come back, it should take me another 12 miles.
Yeah.
So it does not matter where I go from.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if you make a stop not for your farm, you just know that's the business of the farm. But if you go to the store and buy something for your farm, you can count that mileage too.
Okay, yes, okay.
So count those extra miles.
Okay.
So I was also told that if you're like going to Moses too now, you would do
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Any events related to farming,
Mm-hmm.
that's included too.
Yep. Yeah, any of your costs associated with conferences, hotel, food, all that.
So education counts as business expense.
Yep, definitely, yeah. Yep, it's a super important part of your business, improving. It's just like buying a tool. You know, knowledge is definitely a tool. So, and your expenses are different if you have to go out to eat. So, and all you're doing is deducting it. It's not that you're like getting that money back. So you're just basically deducting it so you don't have to pay income tax on that amount. So what do people think for a plan? How are you going to keep records this season? Any ideas?
So,
What are you going to bring to the field? Are you going to have your computer or a tablet in the field?
Well, I think,
You could do it. I mean, you could do a tablet.
why not just getting a folder like this? Get a folder and make a copy of this, and get a folder like that.
Get a binder like that. They have some ones that like close fully and clip shut that are so for waterproof if you're out there in the rain.
Okay.
Those are nice to have. Or if you have it on the clipboard, just having like a plastic sheet on the top. There's a lot of water involved in farming, so.
With the voice dictation on your phones, you can go to your notepad.
Yeah.
And just say, planted this crop in this location on this date. So
Yeah.
instead of having to worry about a pen or a paper, if you have a modern phone,
Yeah.
you can just dictate all of that in there.
I think that's a really good way to do it. Yep. I'm very slow to technology and don't use my phone to any of those extents, but I should. I mean, it would be a good way to do it.
And then if you're taking pictures, you can also have GPS coordinates of where you planted if you have a large scale farm.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. True. Anyone else? Any other suggestions or ideas for plans? Any other questions about types of records for specific information? It's important to think about it now, even though you might be a few years off from wanting to buy a farm or get any kind of loan. Kind of thinking about the records that you need now, since it's required for a few years for a lot of loans. Well, that's all I have. We went through that pretty quick, and you guys had really good questions too.